Yay! All right, so
Excitement.
that we're still waiting on audio, but so that these guys can get started, they actually already got started with some stuff, some setup.
I hear it. I hear it. I hear it.
Yeah, we got audio.
Get up.
All right, cool.
Why don't we tell people the source tunes that are
Yeah.
being remixed?
So remixers, what source tunes are we remixing?
So we agreed beforehand. This is a change to the format, but it's a little easier for us if we know what we're doing beforehand. So.
Yeah, you got to eat that
Okay.
mic. Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
Like this?
Yeah, you got to
All
eat
right.
it. Eat the
So we'll be doing basically just a mixture of things from Final Fantasy VI, like Cella's theme, Terra's theme, and the Prelude, I think.
Yep.
What do you guys think of that? Yeah? Good? All right, you like Final Fantasy?
Songs that people know pretty well, and then you can kind of see how fast we can get things done under intense stress.
Right. So Nabil, what kind of styles are you going to be mixing in?
So basically I'm going to do like just kind of like a contemporary style, like drums, piano, bass, guitar.
Okay.
You know.
Andrew, what about you?
I'm going to do a drum and bass club banger.
Nice.
So it's going to be sweet. It'll be lit, fam.
It's going to be lit, fam. Hashtag namaste. Okay.
Yeah, hashtag namaste, hashtag blessed.
Yeah, okay. All right, cool. So quick show of hands. How many people in here are actually already remixers on the... You guys can get started. But how many people here are actually like remixers on the site or are, interested in actually like getting into music or already make music and put it on like SoundCloud and stuff?
Cool.
Okay, so a couple people. How many people are super excited about learning how to make music but don't do it yet? All right, cool. Basically everybody else. Awesome. So let's get started. How do we get started?
All right. How about this?
Andrew, yeah. What?
Let's take a look at. Can you hear me? Okay. I can't tell. Is my mic low? All right. Cool. As close as possible. All right.
Yes.
So I'm seeing the inverted image from Nabil's screen up there, but just to take a look. So he is working in Studio One, and probably the most common question that people ask when they want to get started making music, or even if they've already messed around a little bit and they're trying to pick something, they say, well, what program should I use? I'd say, I don't know if you guys would agree, but that's probably the most common question. Studio One is well loved by Nabil, and Dave, you use that too, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and the first, that's kind of like the first thing you have to do when you start making music is pick a program to work in. I use FL Studio. Andrew, you can't see his screen right now, but he's using Logic, which is a top choice if you're on a Mac. And so that is what you load all the sounds into, all the plugins. You do your mixing, your mastering.
Yeah, if you're recording as well, because it's not just like using your mouse or using a keyboard to play stuff in and applying samples. If you're like an instrumentalist, you will probably record stuff as well. So DAWs are also... DAW, I said the word DAW. What does that mean?
Digital audio workstation.
Digital audio workstation. That's what you want to use.
So one thing that's kind of funny about DAWs is that, like as with video game consoles where there are sort of fanboys, there is fandom, I would say, surrounding DAWs. Some people are diehard FL Studio. Some people are diehard Cubase. There's a program called Reaper. Some people are diehard Reason. Yeah, it's cheap. It's good. I like it. It's flexible. You can script it.
Okay, they're all good.
So, there's 8 or 9 Sonar. There's 8 or 9 really, really dominant options on the market, Pro Tools. They're all good, and none of them are really going to stop you from making the type of music that you want to make. So if someone says, like, oh, this program is so much better than this other program, unless, like, one of those programs is MTV Music Generator or, something really, really just crappy, it's more about how well you know the software and less about which software you choose to use.
Okay, great.
Yeah, well said. And what we're seeing at the moment, so within this, we're seeing the MIDI editor or piano roll within Studio One up there, and this is probably one of the most important things that you should try when you're trying to pick a DAW, when you're trying to, or if you're interested in switching, is you want to see how the MIDI editing is. Studio One, very good for that. FL Studio, again, it's my personal preference, and Dark Sword uses it as well.
One of the best piano rolls, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's very, very nice. So if you've never seen something like this, the pitches, of course, are on the up and down the Y-axis there, and you can see the keyboard shows which exact pitch is being triggered. And then along the bottom, you've got velocities. That's how loud the notes are, or sometimes that can be used to switch to different dynamics, like if you have a sample library that you're using. And then also, you can't see it right now, but on Andrew's screen, he's got something similar, and he's drawing in automation. For example, adding in vibrato, changing a filter, changing the tone of the sound. That can all be done here. So in my opinion, if you were interested in getting started making music, this is probably the first thing I would look at is how comfortable are you just writing notes, recording notes, editing. Super important.
Okay. Real quick, I just want to say, if you guys have questions that you want to ask at any point in the panel, just raise your hand and ask the question. Because like I said, this is like a dialogue style panel, so
And we have a mic
actually
there,
do
too.
have and also we have merch in the back if you guys want to buy some t-shirts and stuff. All right, so yeah, Dia is waving her hands back there. Yay! Okay, so if you want some merch, go spend some money and get cool stuff. All right, so questions. I saw a question over here. Yeah, there's a mic up here if you want
There
to
is a
come up
mic
here.
centrally located.
Yeah, so if you guys have questions,
Right
you
in
want
the
to
middle.
just come up to the mic, you can do that as well.
Sure. Okay.
Cool. It works.
Hey guys.
Hey.
Hi. I was wondering if you would mind talking a little bit more about articulations, changing the attack of the note from note to note on the piano roll.
Yeah.
Cool.
Sure. You want me to talk a little, Dave?
I could probably handle something like that.
Yeah,
So
go
the
for it.
question, let me just rephrase it and make sure I'm getting it right. The question was how to change articulations on the piano roll for a given instrument, because obviously for certain types of instruments that would be irrelevant. Certain types of instruments don't have different articulations.
Right.
Like for example, a synthesizer, technically, obviously there are ways that you can modulate it and change the sound, but it doesn't have something like a tremolo versus a staccato versus a legato and the traditional orchestral articulations. So the question is more about the orchestral types of...
Right.
Okay.
Like if I were using, like for example, Synth 1 or a sound font on the piano roll, like if I were trying to do like an orchestral sound.
Okay. The answer sort of differs depending on what you're using in terms of sample playback.
Right.
So this advice might not work that well for sound fonts, but it works really well for Contact, where a lot of times the modern sampler instruments, Contact is sort of like the dominant plugin for sampler instruments. So one thing I would advise is if you're really interested in doing orchestral type of composition, or like acoustic in general,
Yeah.
Contact and Contact Player for free for libraries that use Contact Player, highly recommended. It's almost mandatory these days. It really is sort of like the dominant player in the sample library space. What a lot of orchestral libraries will have are called key switches, where the keyboard will be laid out such that the range of the instrument, let's say it's a flute, will be in the upper 3 or 4 octaves, well, 3 octaves, and then down at the bottom, sometimes at the top, there'll be keys that can actually change articulations. And just for people in the audience that might not know, like, well, what's an articulation? When a flute plays a very short note, like a staccato note, well, that's the word for it, it's called staccato, and it'll just go deep, versus a legato note, which is long and sustained and kind of slurs into the next. The samples are different, and it's a different sound. And you can use the keys to actually change between them. So one answer to your question, one interpretation would be that on the key roll, you'd be actually triggering key switches to change between articulations in a contact patch.
So what it'll look like on your piano roll is you'll have like your melody up at the top, and at the bottom you'll have like
Key switch
like notes really like way down in the bass. You're not actually going to hear those notes
Right.
when the sample plays.
Yeah.
It's just switching, your articulations. Or in some sample libraries, I've used a lot of ethnic sample libraries like Raw. It's an old sample library, and that actually gives you like a lot of like kind of like weird like sounds that you
So
can
it'll kind of
make.
depend on like the sample library.
Yeah,
you
it
can download.
depends on the sample library. If you're using something like Synth 1 to actually do like synthesizers,
Yeah.
you're going to play with the ASDR envelope. That's what you're going to play with in order
Yeah.
to do your.
'Cause that's,
your-
that's kind of what I've been doing, using envelopes and
yeah,
stuff.
using
Yeah.
envelopes, ASDR, attack, sustain, what is it, release?
Attack, decay, sustain,
Yeah,
release.
attack, sustain.
Right.
Yeah.
And one of some of
Adds
the newer sample libraries that I've used, like Cinesamples, they've kind of done away with key switches altogether, and they just use the velocity to determine which of the samples it plays. So if you hit the key really soft, it'll play staccato. And then you're controlling the volume not with velocity, with how hard you hit
cool.
the key, but the mod wheel,
Mod
which
wheel.
I actually find a lot easier because I do a lot of my composition just by playing it on the keyboard. I don't do a whole lot of drag and drop or piano roll work. So that works really well for me. So.
Do you do that with a virtual instrument, like a VST or something?
Yeah.
Or-
Yeah.
Okay. Which VST?
Cinesamples. Anything by Cinesamples, and I think Cinematic Strings does it too. But I know all the
Spitfire
Cinesamples libraries
also.
do it.
Thanks.
These all load in Contact, and if you don't know, so Contact Player is free. You can download that, and that will run a lot of libraries. There's a lot of free stuff for Contact Player. There's a lot of very expensive stuff for Contact Player. And then the full version of Contact, it's a few $100s, but that will give you access to like everything else. And there's probably another 1,000 libraries that can run in that.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yep.
Contact with a K. Any other questions, or do we want to check in with our remixers?
Just come up anytime if you have a question, yeah. Otherwise, we can just keep talking about what they're doing.
Yeah.
Let's see. I can.
The man in the yellow suit.
Do you want to tell us
The man
what
in
you're
the
doing, Andrew?
Pikachu.
Just go.
Pikachu, what do you got?
Pikachu has a question.
Yeah. Hey, I kind of do remixes like casually.
Sure.
I haven't published anything yet, but I'm curious as to what the best program is to actually get waveform manipulation without having to hook it up to like an oscilloscope.
Waveform manipulation.
Yeah, like square, saw, sine, like.
Oh, yeah. So I think what you probably want to get is, there's a synthesizer. So do you have any money to spend on this?
I could budget.
No? Okay. So one that is awesome is called Serum. It's just SERUM. It's used by a lot of electronic dance music artists, and it lets you completely edit waveforms basically however you want. You can draw your own. It comes with like 1,000 different ones right out of the box, like different vintage synthesizers and saws, squares, and then it has tools to morph them further. So you'll have a knob that makes it sound different just by changing the knob, and that'll change the shape of the waveform. And it's probably maybe my top synthesizer that I use.
Okay.
I think it's on sale maybe like $100, which is actually not that bad in terms of music software. That would be my recommendation.
Yeah, it's like 2 Xbox games.
I mean, the question again, like before you said saw, square, and everything, I thought you were talking about like taking a waveform of like a sample of someone saying something or like an audio sample and mangling it, in which case the answer would probably be a little different. There are plugins that can do that
Like
specifically.
Melodyne.
Okay.
Melodyne's.
But yeah, yes. Well, on those lines, or like what plugins did you have in mind?
For audio mangling, well, the latest version of Native Instruments Complete, which is this giant, very expensive bundle that has like everything under the sun. It includes Contact. It includes, with version 11, it includes a synth called Form, which is actually really sweet. You can take a waveform and loop through it very granularly and actually create synthesizer patches based on like a sample of someone talking. Can just turn into like a bass or a pad or something.
But it has the full version of Contact also,
Yeah.
which is nice. It has
Reactor.
Man, so that's like $500 or $600. You can get it for cheaper on sale or on eBay. Sometimes people sell like a slightly older version. That has a ton of tools for just like loading in, like Dave said, somebody talking or like a drum hit and just mangling it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Is that on Windows and Mac?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And what was it called one more time?
Well, Native Instruments Complete, that's complete with a K.
With a K.
So Native Instruments are like the titans of plugin makers. And the advice, like if you're looking for plugins and you don't have any to start with, the go-to advice is always going to be go to Native Instruments first, at least from me, probably from most of the people sitting up here.
Start with Contact. And,
Yeah.
It'll
Contact
take you
Native
a year
Instruments.
just to figure out what all the crap that comes with it is.
Yeah,
If you
it's
really-
pretty
There's
massive.
There's so much. They give
Awesome.
you an insane
But it's
amount
good
of stuff.
value. It's good value.
Yeah.
Yeah, KVR. Obviously, there's also free VSTIs.
Yeah, there's a ton of stuff.
Some VSTs that do stuff, but I'm not sure about audio mangling. I don't really do that stuff.
There's stuff. I mean, if you're using Ableton Live, there's stuff built into the DAW that will let you do quite a bit. There's sampler and
Yeah,
simpler.
I
and
try to
whatnot.
do Ableton, but it looks more like a mixing. It looks like more one of the audio mixer panels. You know what I'm talking about, with all the like digital switches on it.
Yeah.
But
Sure.
all right, I appreciate it, guys.
Sure.
Yeah.
No worries.
So I actually have a question for some of the panelists. Okay, so when you are starting a remix, how do you do it? How do you start?
I always start with chord structure
Yeah.
right away because I don't deviate. Like I don't tend to like reharmonize or do anything
Right.
strange like that. I'll take the raw chord structure of the piece, learn the melody, and then just sort of like pick a genre and start to play.
Yeah. So like if you were remixing like the main theme of Legend of Zelda, you would just figure out the chords.
Yep.
Get the melody in your head.
Yep, and then just start playing around with different instruments and see, like, a lot of times I use live instruments in my remixes, so I'll figure out, what I've, it's all ethereal,
So
but
do you-
what I feel, like,
So
am I feeling bluegrass right
do you
now, or-
start with like a genre in mind, or you just kind of just like see what you're feeling?
Usually when I'm like messing around with the chord structures, I'll start playing, and then all of a sudden I'll like land in a groove and be
Yeah.
like, okay, this would sound good as like a bluegrass, like I just said,
Yeah,
or something like
bluegrass,
that. The
yeah.
chord changes line up with a typical bluegrass structure, or I can change them to make them line up with a bluegrass structure, and it would sound really cool.
Right. Right. What about you guys? How do you start a remix?
Well, I know two answers, one of which I've never done myself, but a lot of people, when just starting composition in general, will actually start with the bass and drums. That's never made sense to me, but I hear that answer like a ton from a ton of people. I'm just like, I could never really start a song that way, but that's a very popular way of starting something. Me, I usually start, like Joe said, with the melody and the chords, except I almost always get the chords wrong.
Yeah.
And change them up, and that becomes the arrangement. Sometimes if you misremember something, or you simplify it, or sometimes I guess make it more complex,
Yeah.
that can be the start of an arrangement. Also, I don't know about you, but I tend to get inspiration like just flipping through presets on some of these synths.
Oh, totally.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, and you'll hear a preset where it's like, oh, that's really cool. That would sound good on like X or Y melody from X or Y game.
Yeah, from Pokemon XY.
Yeah, so I
You
usually
said it.
I start with the bass and
bass.
the melody, and then from there I'll work on the harmonic content. So sometimes it's similar, sometimes it's different, but that's how I do it. And then I'll add drums. So almost bass and drums.
I think I'm with Dave. Often I'll start out with the sounds first, like just flipping through presets. I find it's very helpful to load up a few plugins first, like kind of get your. So if you're cooking, you get your ingredients out first, you chop them up and everything like that. And when you're making music, I think actually the same logic applies. So that if all of a sudden you're working on the track and you have an idea like, oh, I want to add a piano. And then you have to go search through your samples, find the piano, wait for it to load. It can kind of kill your inspiration. So you want to try to get a little bit of a template. You don't need to have like 100 things, but I try to load. I'll load Serum, I'll load Contact, Omnisphere, some plugins that I use, so that I can just flip through presets, and then as soon as I hit something I like, and I write a chord, I can just go to the next synth and just immediately have something ready to go. So that's how I start.
Yeah, for me, it's if I'm driving to work and I have like something stuck in my head from like Mario or Sonic or something, and I'll just sort of kind of like start singing it in my head and start singing out loud while I'm driving, and then like beatboxing and doing all that stuff. And I kind of figure out, I should, when I get home, I should like write this down and put it down and figure it out. And so like I'll be like, oh, this like Rose's theme from Final Fantasy IV would sound really good as like bossa nova, and then I'll sit down and I'll try to do it, and then I'll go and listen to like some other songs.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually.
Yeah.
I do a lot of arranging in my head,
Yeah.
and sometimes I'll start things that way, too, without even being, like, at a computer.
Yeah, and sometimes I'll hear like a song on the radio, not even video game music, and I'll be like, oh, I wonder, like that's like a cool groove and that's like a cool beat. Maybe I can like recreate that in like FL Studio, and then I'll try to make it again, and I'm like, okay, this actually sounds pretty good. What if I put like butter building from Kirby's Adventure over this? Oh, that actually sounds really cool. And then it kind of just grows there organically. And then, sometimes it doesn't work, and you just throw it out.
Yeah, you gotta be willing to do that.
Yeah,
throw it
which
out.
is a huge
Yeah.
part of writing music. You just throw out stuff.
A lot of artists submitting stuff to the site have kind of said in their submission emails, this started off as an original track, but then I just decided to turn it into like a Metroid mix or a
Yeah,
Kirby
that's
mix.
one of my Metroid remixes on the website from Metroid Prime. Is actually it was an original song, and I liked the bass line so much, I just turned it into a Metroid track. We actually do have a question.
Yeah, what's up?
Hey, man.
So a bunch of you guys have mentioned using presets as inspiration. How often do presets land in your final mix versus just flipping around for inspiration?
I have a really, really terrible remix on OC Remix from Gundam Wing Endless Duel. That's all FL Studio presets, and it's awful. So don't use no. No.
Don't use the presets that come with the DAW.
Yeah, don't use the presets with the no.
Or maybe more generally, describe your relationship with presets, maybe?
Yeah.
Presets,
It's complicated.
presets make things
It's complicated.
Honestly, presets make things really easy a lot of the time, and I feel like the stigma against presets mostly comes from other musicians and other producers listening to your stuff because they recognize the stuff that you're using. But average Joe listener doesn't care. Sorry, Joe.
Average Joe.
Average Joe doesn't care. Right, Joe?
I do not care.
Yeah. I mean, as with all things, I think the best answer is probably contextual. There are presets out there that are very easily identifiable. In the 90s, like before things largely went software, maybe the late 80s, you had the Korg M1, you had the Korg Wave Station, you had the Roland D50. These are hardware synthesizers where the sounds are actually coming from the keyboard. And there were presets on there, Digital Native Dance comes to mind, where you could just, in a heartbeat, you know where it's from. The Peter Gabriel, the shakuhachi that begins Sledgehammer, like everyone knows that's the emulator shakuhachi, and it sounds the same no matter where you hear it.
Yeah.
So if you're using a preset like that, nowadays you're using it ironically, which is a different usage altogether. But generally speaking, the more complicated the preset is, the more it's doing. If it has arpeggiation going on, if it has multiple layers, if it's really doing a lot of work for you, I think there's more of an obligation to tweak it because then it becomes more your own composition.
And what's also nice about presets is that presets are a great starting point for a sound. You know, you can have a preset and you know, it sounds good, but you can tweak, you know, with a lot of modern stuff, you can tweak the presets, you can change the knobs and whatever, and now you have like a slightly different sound, but you didn't have to do all the work to like get to that sound. You had a starting point with like an interesting preset that they made, and then you get a cool sound from that.
Also depends on the role that it's using within the arrangement. If it's isolated, generally speaking, there'd be more of an obligation to tweak it. You don't really want to intro your mix with something where you're pressing one key and it's this elaborate pad that you didn't like have any input on, if you can help it. So
That's the theme to Lost, is actually just an atmosphere preset. You know,
I believe
just
it.
one
I
note.
believe it. It's been done. I mean, people.
But what it really boils down to in the end is, does it sound good? And if it sounds good, who cares? Right?
Yeah, I kind of liken it to someone being like, you know, if you bake a cake from scratch, and they're like, you mean you didn't grow your own wheat?
Yeah.
And then mill your own flour? You hack.
Yeah.
You know, like there's so many, the presets are out there for a reason. If you can use them intelligently and layer them in a way that's creative and new,
Eventually,
screw
you
the
end up in
critics.
a place where you start goat farming instead of playing music.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Bach, Mozart, Beethoven, Wagner, they all really
They
like
use
they
presets.
use
Harpsichord was built
presets
for
on
them.
every single thing they wrote.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So unless
We got
you're
another
actually
question here.
Yeah. We got another question.
Yes, so I've tried really hard to get in, and maybe not as hard as I could, into figuring out how to do music and how to, I guess, look into it and try and emulate a sound that I like and things like that. So I started watching tutorials online. I tried like downloading FL Studio and kind of messing around with it. And I just like, even just sitting here listening to it, like I just feel like all this terminology is just going straight over my head.
right?
And like some of the stuff I just don't understand as hard as I try and things like that. And just, I don't know, I guess I just need like baby's first understanding of like how to even begin. And I feel like a lot of people in here kind of already know.
Are you a musician?
No.
No, you're not a musician.
Not yet. Hopefully I can.
Okay,
figure
so
it
you
out.
don't play like keyboard, you don't play like, were you in band in school?
I've attempted the guitar.
You attempted the guitar.
it.
So really what you kind of want to do, what would be really useful is try to get a really basic understanding of music theory. This is advice I give to a lot of people. You don't have to like, you know, go to college for composition or something, you know, like learn all like, you know, all this stuff. But like getting a really basic understanding of what an interval is, you know, the distance between two notes, what does the word chord mean? What's a chord progression? These kinds of things. What's a C major scale? What's a C minor scale? These kinds of things. Once you start understanding that, and you can start listening to music critically. And when you can listen to music critically, that means, you know, what's your favorite song? Video game, otherwise, I don't know. What?
I guess the first one that comes to mind is "Everyone Wants to Rule the World" by.
Okay, yeah, great song, right? So when you listen to that song, you kind of just like, oh, it sounds really good. I really like the lyrics, you know. But when next time you listen to that song, think about what's happening in the bass line. Think about what's happening with that kind of like triplet feel that, and then think about like the chords. Why does it work? Why does it sound good? What's the bass line? Next time you listen to that song, just listen to the bass line and try to sing along, not with the lyrics, but with the bass line, and see what's happening there. And then what you start doing is when you start listening critically that way, you start learning how music is written, and you start breaking it down into parts. Okay, and then then you have a starting point. Okay, so we're talking about a lot of technical stuff, DAWs, sample libraries, articulation, it's all going over your head. But when you start learning how to listen to music and break down music and separate the parts, a lot of music is like a lot of part writing. Even like club bangers, there's always there's your percussion, there's at least two. There's your drum and your bass at least, and then you got your thing up top going like that's even that is a thing. You could notate that in sheet music if you wanted to, right? Even Strong Bad's Light Switch Rave song that has it sounds good because it has parts. You can separate those parts. Right? No, I'm serious. Go watch that old Strong Bad email and see how he layers the parts. It's listen critically to Strong Bad, and you'll see what I'm talking about.
Thank you.
Okay. So once you start learning how songs are written and how parts are broken down, then you can be like, okay, I'm going to sit down in FL Studio and I'm going to write the bass line to Everybody Wants to Rule the World, and then I'm going to write the percussion part to it. And now I have these two pieces, and now I understand how to write my own. Does that make sense?
A much simpler way of saying that would be when we evaluate mixes on OCR, we look at two things, arrangement and production. If you're starting off and you're wanting to put music together, I would start with arrangement and kind of defer the production until later, because that's where a lot more terminology, there's plenty of terminology in arrangement, there's a lot to know, but start writing music first, start arranging music first, and kind of, if some of the technical production terminology goes over your head, don't worry too much. Yeah. If some of the music theory goes over your head, don't worry too much, but I'd focus on arrangement initially.
Just jumping in. Is that right? With critical listening and enough practice, you can learn a bunch of things about music theory without knowing what any of it means yet. It just comes with in time and practice and listening.
Hold on, I got something for this.
Good question. Steve-O, talk to us about guitar.
I'll talk about guitar later.
All right.
As somebody who started on OC Remix with zero music theory understanding whatsoever, I was in a punk band for 5 years before trying to do anything for the site. The best thing to do is focus on songwriting first. If you don't understand why things sound terrible, you come up with a good song arrangement, something that sounds good to you, at least melodically. Then you go to Overclocked Remix's workshop forums, where we provide the ability for critical feedback as well as recommendations and tutorials on how to improve how your sounds are.
Hopefully that helps.
Yeah.
All right.
Cool. Thanks,
Cool.
Steve-O.
Thanks, man.
What's up, Ryan?
What's up, man?
Hey, I just have a quick PSA for people who are hearing about buying stuff, and if you're intimidated by the idea that all this costs money, there is a certain amount that it costs. But if you have a .edu academic email address,
it's true.
You can get absurd discounts on all this stuff.
It's true.
60, 75% off in some cases.
Oh, wow.
So if you have a university email address, sometimes the sites themselves just be like, here, enter that for a massive fat discount.
Yeah.
Yep.
If that's not the case, go to your university bookstore in your music building and talk to the people who run those places, at the computer part of the university bookstore. Oftentimes, universities just get that stuff cheaper, and they can pass that on to you.
Yeah.
Selling
So
your
it's
body
definitely
is
worth
also
looking
always an
into.
option.
What was that, Joe?
Selling your body is also always an option. If you really.
Joe.
That's sadly not an option for me, Joe, but I wish it was.
It's not an
I knew
option
this
for
would
some of
happen
us.
when you move to the West Coast. Another good
Thank you for the PSA.
addendum to that. If you've got it, if you're in college or graduate school or whatever, use your academic discount. That is good. Another thing is coming off of this recent holiday season. Wait until, if you can, wait until Christmas holiday season. There were a lot of crazy sales. I spent a lot more money than I should have, but
deals.
yeah.
right, we got a question.
Yeah.
All right, so I have dabbled in OC remixes, all of your songs. I'm still
Sure.
not maybe fully there, but I've heard some stuff.
Mhm.
So I don't know if you can fully answer this, but for changing like the mood of like a certain song already, which I
yeah.
guess would sort of count as a remix. What exactly would you do? Like something super upbeat, like I don't know, like a Mario song, and then maybe making it like a lot more chill and sort
Yeah.
of just slow. Like
So I
any
just
advice?
did this with a remix, and I did Ducati Mountain from Super Mario RPG, right?
Mhm.
Super crazy fast bluegrass thing. I took it to like a quarter of its original tempo and just started adding synth pads and took it from major to minor, and now it's just the most like depressing, like go drown yourself kind of remix I think I've ever written. So yeah, there's an idea.
Major to minor, genre
Yeah,
shift,
major to minor.
tempo adjustments.
Tempo is huge. Just instrumentation.
Yeah.
If you have like a song that's just like rock, just switch the guitar to like a flute.
Nice.
and if the bass is really like grungy, just switch it to like an acoustic bass or something. And if it's like heavy EDM kind of drums, maybe do some like more bossa nova style rhythms or something.
Gotcha.
And there you go.
Gotcha.
And
Yeah, and just from slowing it down, just from changing the chord progression, things will start to stick out. If those were the only two changes you made, if you just slowed the original down, you kept all the original instrumentation, and you changed the chords from major to minor, it would probably sound ass. It would probably sound really bad.
Yeah.
And you say, well, you know what? There's a bass line here that's not really working at this tempo. It's too boring. It's not doing enough. Or there's a trumpet part here that does not work anymore now that it's minor key. So then you start doing additive and subtractive things on top of those two initial, like, let's change the
Yeah.
tempo, let's change the chords.
And the thing is, when you slow something down, you'll end up with a lot more spaces in between the notes and in between things. So what you can start doing is filling in the spaces with embellishments in other instruments and accompaniments, and it can be really useful to do that because you have something chill and then something else going on top of it, something original, or bring in another track from the same game, and that kind of like gives you a little like, oh, like he's playing like Terrace theme, but it's got like the prelude in there with the arpeggios or something.
Right. Nice.
So there's a lot of different things you can do, and we'll actually hear that because Nabil and Andrew are actually working on this. They're remixing the same song but in different styles. So we're
Gotcha.
actually going to take a look at that when they are ready. Are you guys?
One more question.
We'll do. Yeah, one more question.
Okay. Thank you for answering mine.
Sure. Yeah.
Hey.
Hi, I was curious if anyone has background in learning music or like music theory, and how they've taken that experience and also been able to use that in DAWs to learn how to remix.
Right.
I have a degree that is part. Ryan is the most educated of us here. He is part of the OC Remix community, and if you want to talk to him more, he's a PhD candidate, right? Have you graduated yet? Okay.
Dude, painful subject.
Sorry. But yeah, so my degree is a music degree, and it had theory and ear training and composition, all that kind of stuff in it. And I had just written an email yesterday to somebody who was asking, I don't have anything, what should I do? And he said, what's the most useful thing you've learned? I was thinking to myself that really that stuff was supremely useful to me in like getting my music to the next level. Like when I started out, I was just throwing together loops, basically. And I'd hear
Acid Pro.
something, I'd hear a chord or a chord progression, I wouldn't know, why it sounded good. Like this stuff that Shark was talking about. But taking a course in particular ear training, I did a year of that, and that's the ability to. That's basically like you hear a chord and you say, "Oh, what is that?" It's a major chord. It's a minor chord with a seventh. Hear intervals. That was so helpful to me because then when I had ideas in my head or if I'm improvising something, I can immediately think like, "Oh, what's that song I really like? Oh, that chord progression. Okay, I could just write it down immediately." So that translated really well. Actually, I thought that stuff was, even though my degree had like tech as well, production, mixing, I found that was less helpful to me because that was easier to kind of pick up on my own, tutorials online and sharing project files. Whereas to get your head around some of the more advanced theory stuff, to have somebody actually showing you and looking at the sheet music in person, that was a lot more helpful for me to have a teacher. But that was like probably the most useful thing for me, just in general, making music.
And does it help to learn on a piano?
I think so.
Yeah, definitely.
Piano is pretty incredible to learn music theory on, because it's just right there in front of you, and it's so visual. Someone tries to explain the concept of the circle of fifths to you, and you're like, okay, I kind of get it because it's a circle. But if you look at it on a piano, it's like, okay, I go from like C to G, G to D, D to A. I mean, it's like it's so much. It's like, oh, every 5 notes I'm going up, and I'm doing like a circle of fifths, and it's so visual. So I don't play piano. But I can look at a piano and kind of like, okay, these are chords and stuff. And like when I learned, I took some theory classes in high school. I don't have like a college music education. I did like electronics in college, and I'm a web developer. I was really into music when I was in high school, and I was in band for like ever, and I was band geek, and like I took composition classes in high school, and I was very into it, and I'd been writing music ever since. And learning like basic music theory visually with like the piano and seeing the keys on the piano, it's incredibly helpful.
Yeah, it's funny because right now there's actually a counter trend against traditional keyboards as composers, with a lot of like Ableton Push and just grids, Launchpad for Ableton, and what else? There's a couple of them. Machine, MPC style things where you can actually compose on a 8x8 grid of squares, but if you're doing,
it's just way easier.
Yeah, if you're doing jazz, if you're doing if you're doing anything really like super elaborate, that's kind of painful in my mind. Good for EDM though, I suppose. Certain types of EDM.
EDM, hip hop, a lot of electronic stuff. I mean, I do a lot of that stuff on my iPad and everything.
It does sort of depend what the genre is, but generally speaking, like to your first question, music theory is always going to help you. It's never going to hurt.
Yeah.
And even the stuff you do on like Machine and like all those like pads and stuff, like launch pads and stuff, it still helps to have that knowledge of like, okay, I can't play this loop that's in like A minor and this loop that's in like G sharp major on top of each other. I mean, it's gonna sound weird, and you like if you play them together, like that sounds weird. Why does it sound weird? Well, because you've got A minor and G sharp major on the top of each other, you dummy, that kind of thing. So so it's always useful. Music theory is incredibly useful. I mean, if you can take like a class at a local college or something, and having someone explain it to you, it's really helpful. You can find all this stuff online, but like really like watching a tutorial or watching like a lecture series or something is very helpful.
If you've ever heard of Coursera, they have I think there's at least 1 or 2 very basic music theory courses on there that's taught by a college professor and takes you from 0 to more than 0.
More than 0. Let's see ReMix.
Which is
let's
pretty
check
good.
in. Let's check in.
Oh,
on
I just wanted to quickly say, like, I would never consider lack of music theory knowledge like you can still try to make music. There are people that don't have a music theory background that still make amazing music. So it is not a prerequisite towards the creation of music, but it will always help.
Yeah, it helps.
I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna check in with
Nabil first because he's
check
hooked
in with
up.
our remixers, and then we will get to
He's hooked
questions.
up, yeah.
All right, Nabil, you want to show us what you got? You first.
Hooked up. You hooked up.
Let's play the whole thing.
Make sure that it's actually. All right, cool.
There's like 2 distinct parts right now. I didn't connect them together, so it's just gonna stop and then like turn into something else.
I can narrate this.
right. So, Nabil, what possessed you to write that and remix that way?
Well, can I get this closer?
Yeah. Got it?
Yeah, I got it. All right. So first of all, I really like this kind of arrangement texture with the drums and the piano, guitar, bass. I think it's really relaxing, but also kind of has an energy to it. So what I did first was I transcribed the melody, but I sort of did it wrong. And I kind of liked the way I did it better once I looked at the MIDI again, so I kind of stuck with that. So let me just show you the melody by itself without anything else. And these are the chords that I also added with it.
Very nice.
So
Sweet.
I
Nice
also
variation
came up
there.
with this drum beat. So we'll add the drum beat in. So it's just a constant rolling snares, basically. There's nothing really
Like
to
a
it.
like a brushy kind of kit.
Yeah. So it's just 4 on the floor kicks, some rolling snares, and then some hi-hats on the top. And that's it. It's the same loop for like
That's pretty good.
Then I added the roots of the chords in the bass guitar, which is pretty much all you really need from the bass guitar, especially in this kind of texture.
Take out that guitar. Yeah. Nice.
Then finally, for the last bit of this texture that I needed, I sort of copied some songs that I really like. So what they do is they have like a chord arpeggio happening in the acoustic guitar. So that's what I wrote here.
I just wanted to cover two things with what you're showing, because I think they're
Sure.
really good concepts to talk about. We
Sure.
haven't spoken about them yet.
Sure.
One would be like humanization, the fact that the notes aren't quantized. They don't always land directly on the beat. If you're doing EDM, techno, whatever, quantization is kind of assumed that things need to line up exactly. For a genre like this, which I would kind of describe as like Americana folk sort of thing, you don't want things quantized because you want it to sound kind of sort of like it was played by human beings
Right.
who would not play everything robotically on the beat all the time.
Exactly.
And then the other thing is dynamics. Like I think the drum line there is a good example with the snare or the brush snare of dynamics where, again, not only, well, it might actually be quantized, but even if it is, if every note were the exact same velocity, it
Yeah,
would sound
way
very, very
different.
wrong. Yeah,
I can
exactly.
try that right now if you want.
Just
So-
to illustrate
show
the
us.
concept? Yeah, sure.
Oh no.
He's gonna break his song.
Oh no.
Yeah.
All right. So, so you had that next part. We don't have to break it down by next part, but you did something very interesting in the next part. So You did Terrace theme.
Yeah, I did. I also added Terrace theme in there.
Right, but it doesn't sound like Terrace theme exactly.
Exactly.
Why doesn't it sound exactly like Terrace theme? What's
Well-
different about it?
Well, I wanted to match the same chord progression. I also didn't want it to be so sad, because the mood of the previous part was more happy. So what I did first was. So what I did was I transposed it to a major key in the first part.
Oh yes, good.
And then I actually made a mistake here. I was going to do the rest in major, but then I liked how it sounded when I accidentally did it in minor again. And then I just proceeded through the theme like normal. But if you see down here, I also have Salus's theme going under it. Let me remove Terra's theme. We have a little bit of what was before.
So this is like the musical equivalent of Terra Celes slash Vic.
Right.
Okay.
And
good.
again, that Celeste line going under it was again another accident. I just copy and pasted it, and then I liked how it sounded, so I just kept it in there.
Yeah. Great. So like Bob Ross says, just happy accidents,
Happy
right?
accidents.
Right?
Happy little trees. And then I started doubling some lines with strings and flutes because I really like strings and flutes.
Cool.
I like that.
All right, good job, Nabil. You gonna keep working on that a little bit while we talk to Andrew and talk to our friends? All right, so I'm gonna pass this audio cable around.
While we're switching the audio cables, let's take another question.
Yeah,
here.
let's take
This
another
might take a
question,
minute.
and then.
What advice would you have for scrubbing audio from existing songs for purposes of mashups and whatnot?
In terms of tools or techniques.
Where's Steve-O? Steve-O! Steve-O, can you come up here? Because Steve-O actually does a lot of mashups. We have a question about scrubbing
hi,
audio.
person I've never met.
Scrubbing audio for the purposes of mashups. Yeah.
Yeah, pulling parts out, that sort of thing.
All right, so what's the questions? Just
The best way to do it, or actually to give a specific example, in a Sonic CD, the title Tempest theme, I love the background music and I hate the vocals, and I would love to find a way to just remove the vocals altogether from it.
Okay, so and, I was sitting next to you, so I could have just told you this on the side. But it's actually really good to know, because this also applies to people who find samples and you want to selectively take things out of it or mold it to fit into what you're doing. For a lot of removal of audio, specifically vocals, you need to find a karaoke track and do an inverse phase, where you have the song that has the vocals, then you have the song that doesn't. You run an inverse phase filter passing through the music, and it will remove as much as possible outside of the vocals. The vocals will remain intact. It sounds like when you download a lower quality MP3, but the better quality, the karaoke version, the easier it is to isolate that element. If you don't have the option to do that, a lot of frequency manipulation, like the human voices occupy a specific frequency range. So what you can do is you can try and remove the parts of that frequency range that correlate to the voice, and then do post-equalization in order to bring the mix as close to the original as possible. That's basically all you can do.
Yeah, it's never really going to be perfect, but I think there's a lot of tools that are being made nowadays. The technology is kind of getting to a place where they're approaching that kind of thing where you can selectively pull out parts. I know Adobe is working on something crazy with that.
I was about to bring that up.
Yeah.
Something similar. I mean, in the case of Tidal Tempest, it's probably next to impossible because there isn't a vocal out there that's isolated. There are tools like Spectra Layers Pro, which I have right now because it came with the Vegas Pro package, that allows you to see it, like the Adobe example.
Yeah.
You can see the music as a picture that can be edited.
Yeah.
Certain frequencies, volumes. In the case of the vocals, you could probably, if you look well enough, you can actually see it on the visual, and you would use certain tools to just get that part out. And when it plays back, you would get a reasonably good result. So that's something to look.
Is this a specific program you're referring to?
I got Spectra Layers Pro. It came from Sony, but then Sony got bought out by Magix last year, so I don't know the status of that. So right now, but that's one tool that's similar to what the technology is.
I am aware that there is a version of Melodyne where they can isolate different notes within a chord, and I don't even know how that's possible, but they figured out a way to do it.
Yeah,
so.
Melodyne is like black magic.
Yeah. Yes.
We lost audio?
Yeah. Can we get the audio back on, the audio feed?
Yeah, so I was hoping maybe you guys were a little bit more ahead of the curve than I am.
We got
that
it.
Specific way.
Yeah, thanks, Steve-O.
All right, thank you.
Thanks,
All right,
Bebo.
thanks. All right,
check in
Andrew.
All right.
Do we have
so,
music?
Yeah. So basically, this is what I've been working on the whole time here. I decided I wanted to go for a more minimal version of the Terra Celis combo. So it's something like this. So no, just kidding.
That was great, man.
That sounds really good. It's a hot beat. I like it.
Good work, man.
Post that right now.
You've been busy.
Yeah. All right. So actually, it's kind of cool because so where Nabil used Celis's theme as his sort of base, I used Terra's theme, and later on, I'm kind of just started that. But where he took Terra's theme and turned it major, I took Celis theme and turned it minor. So we get a little change.
Like a yin yang.
Little remix battle.
Right? So right now, what I've done, do you want me to just play what I've got so far?
Let's play it first. And
We
then
can
we'll break
play
it
it.
down.
Let's just play it.
Yeah. Team Skull.
Oh man, we got Team Skull in the house. My manky. All right, so
Can we do projection, or is it going to be complicated?
I've got HDMI, but if
It might be complicated. It might screw things up.
So basically, what I've
Just
done,
turn your laptop around. and
Close
just
your
show
eyes
me.
and let the
Yes,
sound
close your
surround
eyes
you.
and visualize.
Yeah, visualize. There you go.
It's okay.
So what I started with specifically is first I needed a hype intro. So started with a pretty simple drum with claps. And some of the claps are filtered in. So, and then from there, added in the chords, and then I adjusted the arpeggio a little bit.
I love that. I'm sorry. It's really good.
After that, added in the bass, which I'm actually going to turn down a little bit for this system. On headphones, you can have it more. So bass is going to be turned down a little bit, so it's not going to kill you guys. And then I have what's referred to as "Oh shit," a riser.
It actually says that on the screen.
Which is how you know you're doing it right. And then so wanted to have some cool bass stabs, and it's doubled with a synth up an octave, so it gets a little bit more grit. And so once I had my intro down, I knew I was in the right place. And then what I wanted to do is take that cool beat and then make the actual chords and just turn them into something a little more sliced up. So this is why you hear
Do just the chords.
yeah. So this is the bass and the.
Okay,
Something like that.
I have a question about that bass line.
Yeah.
That bass line's not in the original track.
You are right.
So where did it come from?
I decided that I wanted to add it myself.
Oh, interesting. And how did you come up with that bass line? Is it just like out of the ether, or do you listen to a lot of electronic music and try to ape the style?
A little of both, I think.
I'm asking you very leading questions.
Yeah, actually, actually, I think this type of bass line would be more for like certain types of metal, I think.
Yeah.
And then would just be transferred to an electronic style, so you can kind of break the rules like that. And then, but there's certain electronic things, like for the melody specifically, I just used a cool program called Super Audio Card. It's, and I wanted to make the melody a little bit different. So if you listen closely, there's a little bit of different changes to it. So I'll just play the melody solo. Tangent.
Say something.
So guys, two quick things. One, we have 2 hoodies left, so if anybody's interested in a hoodie, now is your chance. Second, Super Audio Cart is something that you can actually buy over there. What you can get is, it is $99, and we will give you a code that you take home, and you put it in, and then you get Super Audio Cart.
It's normally 150. This
Yeah.
is like
So-
the MAGFest
It's
rate.
the special MAGFest price. Super
I thought
Audio
it was
Card.
$100, so I thought it was like a sweet sale for that $1 off, but that's like way better. Just saying. So yeah, we're in the back corner, guys. Feel free to hop on over.
All right, cool.
So let's see. I guess we should probably check back. Is there anything else you want to add, or shall we check
Oh, yeah,
back?
so the plans here right now, near the end, let me just load up that specific part, just like the chords.
So I've got a quick question. Some of the glitching there is actually just sequenced, right? You're not using like stutter editor.
No,
or
I'm not
anything
using
like that.
anything. I'm just
Yeah.
like cutting up the MIDI data by hand, and since I don't have a keyboard with me, I'm just doing it all with the mouse. But yeah, so like right here, like at the tail end of here, I just cut the note into a bunch of different pieces. Or like right over here. Oh, that's probably
Those little hits there, right?
So like small variations on the melody kind of make it your own, and
Just for fun.
yeah,
It's
it's
good
cool.
articulation.
It's also for fans of the original song. It's a cool surprise that sometimes they think it's cool, and sometimes they're like, "Why did you ruin my favorite song?" So it's kind of
Wow.
like you can never be sure, but if you think it sounds good, then it's your remix. So do what you want to do.
Yeah. Cool. So you're gonna get back to work, and Nabil's gonna get back to work.
Yep.
Some more questions?
And then we'll do some more questions and some more answers, and gonna have a good time. All right, what you got, man?
All right, so I know with OC Remix, you guys do a lot more with changing genres when you're doing stuff, and you guys talked a little bit about that, about changing something to bluegrass or changing things to EDM and whatnot.
For sure.
Any tips for how to stay true to the original, but also keep it your own thing if you're trying to stay in the same genre?
I would say like really commit to the genre. A lot of Mega Man music. If you look at just the parts. If you transcribe it to like sheet music or something, and you just look at it, okay, this is like a drum track, this is a bass line, it's just rock music, But then you listen to like a rock version of something like Wily Castle, from Mega Man 2, and it sounds really like full and big, and that's kind of because they just sort of lean into the fact that it's a rock song, and they kind of go crazy with it. So a lot of times with video game music, especially older video game music, it's sort of like a simple version. It's kind of like it's a starting point. And so if you kind of just say, okay, this is a rock song, and I'm going to really lean in hard to how it rocks out, you know, you do all of the stuff that rock does. Crazy solos, drum breaks, you know, really like a lot of embellishments. Because, you know, like Mega Man, like a lot of Mega Man, like drum tracks are just like, you know, but a drummer is not, a drummer in a rock band is not just going to play the whole track, right?
Right.
He's going to go crazy. He's going to, you know, get on the cymbals and on the toms, do a lot of fills, all that kind of stuff. That's how you can make it your own. You can lean in to the genre that it is and really like listen to other music in that genre. One of the pieces of advice I give to people when they're starting out and they're writing music and they want to get good at writing music and figure out how to do stuff is just listen to a lot of music. Like listen to a lot of music, not just music that you like. Try to keep an open mind and try to listen to like everything, and you will learn a lot. And you'll be able to pull in a lot of things. So, you know, if you have like, you know, if you're doing like a Mega Man rock remix and you listen to like, you know, some really heavy metal stuff, or, you know, some old school rock and roll, you can bring a lot of those elements in and stay true to the genre that the original song is, but at the same time add your own spin to it.
Yeah, and really quick to add on top of that, nothing wrong with doing a straight cover of the same exact genre, same exact melody, same exact everything, tempo, etc. It's probably not going to get accepted by OC Remix because part of what we look for is interpretation. But we have a lot of mixes on the site that do stay pretty close to the original, that do stay with the same genre. If you're staying in the same genre and you're staying with the same exact chord progression and you're staying with the same exact tempo and structure, you're making your life a little bit harder in terms of bringing like your own interpretation, but it's still doable. People have done it. Add in an original solo or like syncopate the melody the way Andrew is right now. I mean, there's nothing preventing you from syncopating the melody and staying in the genre. Perfectly doable.
You can also add a couple extra, you can beef up chords. That's something that in some of my remixes, like I did a Phantasy Star Online remix, and so it already had kind of a jazzy feel, so I just kind of change up the chords a little bit, add some seconds, add some sort of movement between chords so it can still stick to the same rhythms, but the chords get a little bit more complex, and you're not changing the mood. So that kind of goes to what Chark was saying, that it's like leaning into the genre.
Yeah.
Would you say that holds true still with newer songs? The genre's a little bit more defined. I find I'd like to remix things from like Guilty Gear or Blaze Blue,
Sure.
but that's really close to what I would normally write stylistically, anyways.
Right.
It's harder.
It's a lot. It is a lot harder. You know, the kind of like the. I love a lot of new video game music, but the beauty of old video game music is kind of like, there's a simplicity to it because of the constraints on it. So you get a lot of like, that's why there's so many remixes of old video game music, because there's so much you can do with it, and it's a little bit harder to do stuff. So you really have to try a little bit harder when you're doing something like Guilty Gear. But at the same time, you know, Guilty Gear is rock, but rock is a huge umbrella of a genre. There's so many different kinds of rock and so many different things you can do in terms of just instrumentation, in terms of tempo. You know, maybe, you know, take a track from Guilty Gear, drop the tempo down a little bit and make it a little bit, you know, a little crunchier, that kind of thing. I mean, there's so many things you can do.
Secondary source,
Yeah,
using a secondary source.
Use a secondary source,
For a
like,
verse
you know,
chorus.
a big thing that we do on OC Remix is we have like these remix battle competitions where people like mix two tracks from the same game into one track. So, you know, if you're doing Guilty Gear, get like, you know, one character's theme and then like an ending theme or like another another stage theme, and kind of do
Weave
both
it
of
in,
them
right,
and layer them, like kind of like what we're doing here with Terra's theme and Celis's theme. You know, they're very different songs, but, you know, kind of like layering them together. And you can stay true to the feel of Guilty Gear, I think, but still kind of play around in that giant playground that is sort of like rock and metal and everything.
Does that help?
Yeah, it actually helped a lot. Thank you, guys.
Cool.
Yeah. Hey, what's up?
Soldier.
What's up, guys? How you doing? A lot of what I was going to ask was actually answered like in the last question, but I just uploaded a Snake Man remix to the workshop, and it's like the first thing I've ever made in a DAW or anything, but like, I guess my question was like, it's kind of conservative as far as like, it follows the same melody, a lot of the chords are the same, I don't know if anyone's heard it. I literally posted it yesterday, but I think Sir Nuts commented on it. But like, because a lot of my favorite remixes on the site right now are like kind of more complex stuff, like a lot of like Maze Dude stuff, even some like Will Rock stuff is like really, really like intricate and stuff. Yeah, I was just wondering, like, it's kind of difficult to talk about without having heard it, but like, I kind of want to make it like a world percussion kind of like tribal kind of track, but like still have like the Snake Man, like the chords, the theme and everything. That way you can like recognize, oh, it's Snake Man. It's just not like fast and rock. It's more like ambient. So honestly, you actually answered a lot of my questions already, but like, I guess kind of the same thing, kind of the question I had was like, too liberal versus too conservative, especially if you're like just getting started, because like I'm leaning on being too conservative just because like I want to like get my hands dirty and stuff like that. But
That's a good place to start. That is a good place to start.
Okay,
Because
good.
sometimes people like they get into OC Remix and they're like, oh, but like OC Remix wants something like really interpretive, so I'm gonna go nuts. And then they submit something and we're like, this is an original track.
Sure.
It sounds pretty good,
Yeah.
but like I don't hear Eris's theme in this at all.
Yeah, like I'm a big fan of, this is a really extreme example, but that Maze Dude Doom 2 track, which is like the last level of a game, and it's like 8 minutes long, and it sounds like a complete hellscape. It's like super, super scary and really terrifying, but like, and not that I want to like start there, but like, I listen to a lot of like your old stuff, Dark Sword, DJ Pretzel, McVaff, as kind of like an inspiration to get started, because I hear that and I'm like, I can make that. It's like kind of simple grooves and stuff, so. And a lot of the stuff that's accepted to OC Remix now seems like a little bit more complex and like a little more layered and stuff that like...
Times have changed.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, because I feel like, obviously, when you started the site, it was probably like, just like some jams that you were working on and like taking this Shinobi theme or whatever, mixing it up. And it's like, it's fun to do that, but I don't know, just kind of get discussion started, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, sure, Steve.
Because this is where I get to talk about guitar.
Yeah.
Okay, so I totally understand what you're getting at. And there's 2 points that I would like to bring up. First off, you mentioned the style you're working on. The best way to make something sound like something is to study things within that style.
Yeah,
Listen to the instruments, see what you can do to isolate them, find samples for them, and then experiment with inserting them in the arrangement you're working on.
Sure.
So if you're doing world percussion kind of stuff, there's a lot of sound fonts out there. You know, maybe not high quality, but something you can use to just do a draft.
And honestly, like cheap sample libraries.
Yeah,
also.
sure. Exactly. And the second part is the whole idea of conservative arrangement versus liberal arrangement. This particularly applies to live instruments like guitar, where you can wank off a lot on guitar.
Yes, it's true. It's true.
But the whole thing is you want to get that core melody. You want to understand what it is you're working off of first.
Sure.
So getting that conservative thing, you can always make things more liberal once they're already conservative.
Yeah.
If you've created something that's so far from the source that you can't find your way back, it's a lot more difficult to recover that composition.
That's kind of the way that there's a Terranigma mix that was posted like a few weeks ago that kind of reminds me of that, where like the first half is like, it's almost like the same exact melody from the first Home Village, and then the second half it kind of like evolves and stuff like that, so I feel like that's a good, like safe template, I guess.
Right, so, and that's the whole idea of having other people listen to it. If they can't recognize, like, what is our source requirement for OC remixes?
It's 50%.
Okay.
Kind of.
And Larry stopwatches, like, he doesn't
Yes.
count rests. It's ridiculous. But it's technically 50% of your song has to be the recognizable source. But, I mean, it's a nebulous thing. Really what you want to do is, like, what I look for is, like, if I listen to a song and I can't tell that it's, like, the overworld theme from Mario, then it's not a remix of Mario.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I gotcha.
So there's got to be like something there that's recognizable. But the thing is, like, I think there's a remixer. He hasn't really like been involved in the community for a long time. Israfel. You guys remember Israfel? He did some really cool remixes back in the day, and I think he had made a post a couple of years ago talking about how kind of wonderful and wild it was that people were actually like using video game music and like doing like these like crazy, really detailed, like intricate compositions to the point where stuff wasn't really recognizable, but like that's what they were doing, and it was coming from like VGM. They were starting with VGM as a base for that, and kind of going that way. And it is kind of fantastic, but also like when you're doing a remix, I mean, this is getting kind of like complicated, but like when you write a piece of music, you're writing it for two, for yourself and for everyone else.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
And, you know, when you write it for yourself, you can do whatever you want. But when you write it for other people, you're at their mercy, almost.
Sure.
You know, so, you know, if I write a remix of Kirby, Butter Building from Kirby's Adventure, you know, I can write it however I want to write it, and I can be fine with it. But as soon as I put it out to the world, it's going to be judged by
Yeah.
art. Just gets judged. That's just what happens. People listen to a song or watch a movie and they say it's shit or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, it's great, shit, whatever.
I feel as long as you're confident in it, then
Yeah,
I mean, you
but
can
at
stand
the
by
same
it.
time, if I'm writing a Butter Building remix and I put it out to the world, I want people to enjoy it. You know, it's selfish to just be like, I write this for myself. I'm going to put it out to the world, and if everyone hates it, I don't give a fuck.
Yeah,
okay,
right.
then why put it out? Okay,
Yeah,
so
right.
so what you want to do is, you know, you got to kind of think about the audience a little bit. So, you know, that's the kind of this is getting very complicated, but that's kind of
Yeah,
like
I didn't mean
that you're
to
doing,
ask such an elaborate
when you're
question.
writing
It's just
music
kind of a
and, you know, any kind of art you're creating, whether it's writing or composing or drawing or, you know, making a movie or whatever. Does anyone want to add to this, or am I just babbling?
Well, actually, you know, you mentioned a specific mix, and you mentioned a specific mix. Prince of Darkness had a mix where we went back and forth quite a bit because there were sections where it was soloing over like something not unlike the progression from the song, and the question was, is that source or not? So when Sharik says things get nebulous, you can say something is an arrangement of source, but to what extent?
Yeah.
Is the melody present, or are you just talking about the chords?
Yeah. What
or are you
counts-
just talking about like even a rhythm? I mean, Drum
Yeah.
Ultima has a percussion-only
it's purely
mix on the
percussion,
site.
yeah.
So yeah, it's very hard to be completely objective about something like arrangement. The 50% thing is really just a guideline. Larry takes it a little seriously.
At,
but
at some
he's
point,
not here
everything,
right now.
At some point, everything becomes a remix of Bach Bell's canon anyway.
Yes.
So.
True.
Yes.
True.
Yes.
Or becomes a Chrono Trigger remix.
Yeah.
Right.
Cool. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you.
Hello. I've been playing music for about 4 years now.
Cool.
I've only been able to read like sheet music for maybe a year and a half. So I've been kind of staying out of remixing because I don't know how to like transcribe it very well. So I was looking for like either tips on just recognizing tones or notes or whatnot, or just resources for game music that's been transcribed already, like sheet music for games.
Sure.
Well,
I can do three things just real first.
Sure.
First, I just want to say that transcription does not have to require a knowledge of sheet music. And I would say probably even a majority of people who are quote unquote transcribing music are doing so by ear in front of a keyboard and not really ever thinking in terms of a musical staff. And I know that's how I do it. So don't wait necessarily to transcribe until you're super familiar with sheet music. You can transcribe by ear without even being able to read sheet music at all. The second part of that is VGmusic.com has like thousands, 30,000 plus MIDI files. You can always take a MIDI file, import it into a DAW, and you've got essentially sheet music there if the DAW is capable of rendering it as sheet music. So that might be one of your best sources. Third, and this is just kind of like an advertisement for an upcoming feature, one of the things that we're using our Patreon funding to put together is hosting sort of attachments to existing mixes where, especially for piano mixes, but for other stuff too, if the submitting artist has sheet music available, we're going to start hosting that too. So eventually, hopefully, OC Remix itself would be a resource for you where you can look at what an artist has done in terms of arrangement, not just in terms of the MP3 file, but you'll also have sheet music there to go along with it, maybe even a MIDI file, etc. Sharik?
Oh yeah. So I just wanted to say, Andrew talked about this a little bit before with ear training.
Yeah.
Ear training is incredibly important. So what are you playing, piano or?
Bass guitar.
Bass guitar. Okay. Yeah. Are you taking lessons with a teacher? Or is it mostly self-taught stuff?
I took lessons for about a year,
Yeah.
and then I decided I would
Sure. Yeah.
just kind of mess around.
So you want to try and take an ear training class, or look for some ear training exercises online. Andy, do you know any?
Can I mention?
Off the top of my head, I don't know a specific resource, but I mean, that is the actual search term, is like ear training in quotes, and that's like a specific thing for it will make your life a lot easier, because that's basically being you sort of have to drill it over and over, is just to like hear a major chord and be able to say, okay, I know that's major, and then hear 4 notes and say, okay, that's a 7th. And with enough practice, you just pick it up, and then you can listen to something on the radio or listen to video game music, and you can immediately pick out the chord progression. You might have to hear it a couple times, but
Can I mention
that's the search term.
Yeah. Can I mention many of us remixers have come up doing transcription work for many years. I was like a veteran of VGmusic.com for a long time. So was Jarrell Jones back there at Merch. Who else? Busta Tunes around here somewhere who started off on transcription, and he just composed Lara Croft and the Temple of Osiris. So that's a great starting point. Critical listening, the ear training it's similar. Learning to listen to notes and putting them down in a DAW or in a.
So intervals and then meter, really important.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Actually, one more thing. I may be wrong about this, but I think that Berklee College of Music does have a DVD series that's just called Ear Training and Harmony. And it's just, you just pop it in and you start practicing. So maybe look that up. I could be totally wrong. If I am, sorry. But I think it's out there.
Appreciate it.
Most of my sound creation background is in chiptune, but I'm a complete sucker for ambient pads, but I have no clue how I create them. What do you suggest I do to learn the basics of that?
What was the ambient what?
Pulse stretch.
Ambient
Pulse
pads.
stretch is not bad.
Ooh, well, so have you done any? So with chiptune stuff, like, are you familiar with sort of the basics of synthesis? Okay, yeah. I think so. The go-to answer that a lot of people give is Omnisphere. It's a plugin that has it's just a ridiculous synthesizer and sampler, and it has all these amazing textures in it sort of already. But I think if you already have something of a background there, I'm going to recommend Serum again. Okay. Serum is just, it's so amazing because you have such a variety of waveforms to start with, every imaginable variations of squares and sines and all that. And it makes it so easy to multiply the sound. You can add, 10 voices to it, detune, and then it has a whole effects track, all of which can be modulated. That's not just for ambient stuff, but that's my go-to now for just creating something from scratch that's synthesized. And in terms of sampling stuff, Steve-O mentioned there's something called SERUM. But that's for synthesizing stuff from scratch. Sometimes it's cool to start with like an audio, sample of some kind. And Steve-O mentioned one called Paul Stretch, which is a Windows program. I think it's Windows only. But there's a Mac kind of equivalent called Time Freezer. And both those are the same concept. Basically, you load in a little bit of audio, and then you play with different parameters, and it spits out something that's like 1,000 times as long.
Interesting.
You get a cool ambient texture.
Yeah.
And it lets you really control sort of how it can sound very different, whether you, depending on the different options you select. So Paul Stretch is free, and I love that. I actually made a video on it. And Time Freezer, I think, is like $50 or something like that.
More fundamentally, since you mentioned you're already familiar with chiptune and sort of the basics of chiptune synthesis, you can actually create some half-decent ambient pads. I would say working within the chiptune sort of paradigm, a slow attack, obviously, is going to be key. You're probably going to want to apply some filtering so that you don't have a ton of stuff going on.
Valhalla Shimmer.
And then there are
plugin.
reverb plugins that will actually almost create an ambient pad from almost any input. Yeah. Valhalla Shimmer is not too expensive. So if you wanted to just stay straight chiptune, nothing wrong with that, you could still make some ambient pads without branching out and doing other plugins, just with like DSP, just with applying effects to slow attack synths.
That's mostly what I've been doing so far.
Yep. So
Yeah,
real
cool,
fast
cool.
before we have to listen to the mixes where they're
Yeah.
at, because we're almost
almost
out of time.
Yeah.
If you want to listen to a single soundtrack, Chiptunes Wise, that's basically like a dissertation on how to use 16-bit synths to come up with ambient pads. Listen to the Waterworld soundtrack on Super Nintendo. It's incredible.
Oh yeah, Waterworld, that is really good.
All right, we're gonna check in with our remixers.
We'll hang out here after also if
Yeah.
anybody has more questions.
Yeah,
or
we also
anything
have a
specific, we'll
panel
hang out.
tomorrow too. So Nabil, are you ready to show us something? Can we do Andrew first?
Sure.
All right.
Oh yeah. Well, actually, could you pimp the other panels? We have another.
Okay, yeah. So while we're getting set up, we have another panel tomorrow. The actual main OC Remix panel is at I think 4:30 in panels 3. Panel 3, 4:30. We will be there. So if you have questions about stuff, you can ask us there too. It's going to be a good time. We're going to have games and music and trailers and news, and it's going to be awesome.
Yeah. All right. So what I've done in the interim is I have spent more time on that the cool chopped up bass part for the main section, and I tried to basically what I would do is write something that sounded kind of cool, fit with the drums, maybe rearrange what I had in the drums previously to fit with what I'm doing, and then double it with the other synth. I think that's pretty much all I did, but it sounds pretty cool to me. So we'll go with that. So here we go.
Get Lil Jon on.
What? Yeah! Oh,
Oh yeah, I added a halftime section for a couple measures too. This is the start of the Cellus' theme. It doesn't quite sound like it yet, but and I have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's pretty good.
Can you play real quick just some of that bass line that you added since the previous version?
Sure. So the new bass stuff is.
You've got 3 synths there, I think. I'm counting.
Yeah.
3.
So what I'm doing here is I'm doing my bass synth, and then I'm doubling it with a different sort of crunchy synth, and I have it hard pan left and right, so it has more stereo space in the center for the melody. And then with the melody, so you can kind of just sort of combine the two. That's what I got.
So I just want to point out
Very
something
nice.
that Andrew did there. So Tara's melody, Tara's theme's melody is pretty interesting in that it's a lot of those like sustained notes, right? So it's da 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 da, right? Right, it goes on like forever, or like 2 measures. So what Andrew did there is he has Tara's theme play, and then he uses the bass line to add movement. So Andrew, could you just play that again real quick? You can hear it. Oh, we switched cables. Okay. So, but basically, Tara's theme started in the melody, and then during that sustained note, he had movement happening in the bass line. So that's a really good technique you can use to start filling in the space, and that helps your music sound fuller.
Keep it fresh.
Keep it fresh. Keep dash. There's more stuff going on in your like sound. So like a lot of times you'll hear like just like very static like. Beginners, when you listen to beginners' music, they don't have that kind of thing with the call and response, and they're not filling in the spaces, and you're sort of hearing like really like static, long sections of sustained notes, and it's a good idea to kind of fill in the space. That's all I wanted to say.
Good
Cool.
advice. All
Nabil.
right, Nabil, what do we got?
What do you guys think of this panel so far?
You guys stayed.
Oh, sure. So normally I would use a little keyboard that has a little joystick, and then you can add vibrato just by like a little bit of vibrato by moving the joystick slightly. It's sort of like a I don't know, like a PS4 or like Xbox like joystick, but it's on a keyboard.
Yeah.
And so it's just but it's analog and it does it. So here, what I did, since I don't have that right now, is I've been doing it with the mouse, and you can just draw in like points, and like so you start with 0 vibrato, and then you draw another point, and it'll draw a line, and it'll slowly like work its way up. Yeah, I think pretty much any DAW can do something similar.
We need to. We have like 2 minutes. We have like 1 minute
generally
left.
referred to as automation.
We'll be here after.
We'll
Also.
be here after to answer questions. So let's Nabil quickly.
Those arpeggios.
Yay! So we're basically done. But Nabil, what did you do in the end there? What did you add in the end there?
So I added the prelude at the end, but I didn't want to add just the prelude by itself because it has a different chord progression. So what I did instead was I sort of copied the texture of the prelude, which is those running arpeggios up and down. I think it's like 4 octaves. And then I took the melody of the prelude, but then I started changing it to fit the new chord progression. And so it sort of melted together with the cellist theme and the terrace theme. So it's all kind of like a cohesive song.
Nice. Good job, Nabil. Yeah. So thanks for
very
coming.
different takes.
Yeah, very different takes. We had like a club banger and like kind of like a little acoustic jam. Really cool. So thank you guys for coming to the Remix panel, Remixing 101. Hope you learned something. Hope it was helpful. Thank you for staying till the end. We had a lot of people just like be like, "Oh, this is dumb," and leave. So screw those guys. You guys rock. yeah. But thanks for
All right,
coming.
we'll hang out here for more
Panel tomorrow at 4:30 in panels 3, and we will be around right now if you guys want to ask us some questions. So, thanks.